Morning, everybody. 2 years ago, when I was visiting on the National Holy Ground Tour, we had an opportunity to stop at Plymouth. And you know, I'm British, but God has a sense of humor, so when we were leaving Plymouth, there were a number of young people who really said, "What was that boat? I didn't know anything about it." So I started to explain to them that there was this holiday company called Mayflower Expeditions, and they went bankrupt in the middle of a cruise, and so people stayed here in America and did the best they could. And I realized I better change that story because a lot of people were believing it. Really? No, I didn't know that. But I did learn one thing. I learned that on that Mayflower, and Father talks about this in his Yankee Stadium speech, there were two kinds of people, right? There were 102 people, I think, on that boat, and only 52 were pilgrims. The other 50 came along because they wanted to make their fortune in America. Actually, both groups were necessary. The boat wouldn't sail half full. But 52 people, that was the Pilgrim Fathers about which Father spoke so often. I learned that, on the sort of guided tour at the Mayflower. And this was about 40 minutes outside of Plymouth on the way here to Boston. And I really heard the voice of God speaking in my ear. He said, "Michael," I'm always in trouble when people call me Michael. When my wife says, "Michael, it's time to leave the state." "Michael," said the voice of God, "would you mind counting the people on this bus right now?" Okay, it's easy to count people on a bus. They sit 2 by 2. How many people were on the bus? Of course, 52. And God said to me, "I really wonder if you have any faith in my ability at all. Do you only think I can work in 1620 or 1776 or 1976? Or can I work today with the same authority and power that I've always had? It entirely depends on the people. It's not up to me, it's up to you. So chin up and believe that despite all the difficulties, God can start a new pilgrim movement in America." That's what Father said, right, in Yankee Stadium and Washington Monument. I came to lead the young people of America to make a new pilgrim movement in this country. Every time I come to Boston, I think about that story, and I think about the importance of this city in God's providence. And every time I'm in this building, I feel how grateful I am to the pastor and to the community, many leaders who've been here for a long time, like Reverend Kim I see sitting back there, and Catherine and others, because of your investment and sacrifice here in this building and in this city. But I'm here to share with you this morning a little bit about the promise that we made to True Mother a few years ago and very much more recently. I have a simple PowerPoint. It's going to include, as you know, a report to you about this building. Then I think Jim is coming up to present a perspective from the community, and we'll have an opportunity for discussion. We don't have forever, so please be patient. Know that nothing will happen today permanent, but please open your hearts and hear what I would like to share with you today. So I'm going to go to presentation B. Here we are. Let's see if I can get this to work. Nope. Oh. Is it turned on? Seems to be. Here's the technical wizard. So now it's working? Press this right button? Okay. I wanted to share with you briefly what happened a month ago in Korea and 2 months ago in Korea at the Cheongguk Leaders Assembly. Actually, out of nowhere, True Mother called Dr. Kim and myself and the leaders of Korea and Japan the first time, and then the second time some of the rest of the leadership team in America, and the leaders of 21 nations to the Cheongguk. It was in July. And basically what she said to us was, look, 4 years ago we announced the 2020 vision, and we made certain plans and goals towards that promise. But how are we doing? Actually, really, I want to hear an honest-to-God report from all of you about how things are going. And not only that, but I'm interested in focusing my attention on the nations that have the best opportunity of making a significant breakthrough by 2020. You know, I know you're all working hard, but I want to know where I could focus my attention. It was a difficult meeting. We had 25 one-hour reports, one after the other. We had a short break to sleep, but it was tough. First thing was tough was that people really were honest. For example, the Japanese church reported, "You've relied on us for a long time, true parents, but our members are getting old, and they're deeply in debt, and the country as a whole is getting old." You know, Japan is probably one of the lowest birth rates in the world. It will disappear in about 300 or 400 years. So, you know, usually Japan gives the reports where everything's going magnificently and we're going to donate more and more and more, and our missionaries are going all over the world, and they did say that. But they also told Mother, you know, since you asked us to be honest, let us share with you some of the burdens. And I also remember the report from Russia. As you heard in the kind introduction that Spase read, there was a time when I was working in Russia. Believe it or not, I actually taught the divine principle in Russian, but I've forgotten most of my Russian. Anyway, there was a time when 300 or 400 people would come to workshops every week in 12 different locations, right? There was a time when people came by the trainload to study God's Word in Russia. Anyone part of that campaign? Thank you. It was so hard to hear the Russian church of today report now we only have about 400 members. And President Putin has established new laws that make it illegal to witness, illegal to teach the divine principle, even in your own house. The only place we can do it is in our church, which we know is bugged every which way by the FSB, former KGB. You know, my heart was weeping. How could this be? From thousands a week down to this holy remnant. And we heard from Israel. You know, there was a time when I worked in Israel as well. God has given me that opportunity, and I'll always remember in the early 2000s going there with hundreds, thousands of people right in the middle of the uprising, the Second Intifada, and how we had hope that True Parents' teaching would be able to transform Israel and Palestine. And I think many of you went to Israel as well, right? You participated in those events. But the truth is that 15 years later, there's not much evident. I'm sharing with this because I want to be transparent with you. It's not easy to go to leaders' meeting with True Parents, and it's certainly not easy to be completely honest because God also requires faith, right? Inspiration, confidence. When Mother finished hearing all these reports, this was in July, she said, "I'm not satisfied with you guys. Mostly because I feel no sense of teamwork. You all came here thinking about how to present what's going on in your country in the best possible way so that I would favor you with the grace of God. But I don't see it that way," she said. "I see you as a team. The success of one country is the success of every country. Not one of you had in your report a sense of how you would help the other nations fulfill their goals." So we had to concede, yeah, Mother, you have a point. You know, we have been thinking primarily about ourselves. So she told us, come back to me 1 month later and represent your plan of what you're going to do. And don't forget, you got to play together nicely. We have got to be a team. We're not doing anything if we try to do it by ourselves. So we made a report to True Mother. I'm going to summarize it briefly because there's not a lot of time. But it is available on our website, and you can also see video of Dr. Keehan Kim presenting the report to the leadership team in New York about a month ago. It was he who presented this report to True Mother in Korea. So the first thing is, he explained, we have a mission statement. It's very simple, and many people have critiqued it, but essentially it's to bring America back to God through the marriage blessings and the teachings of true parents. So there's three things in there. First of all, that America belongs to God. It always has. True parents taught us that America is God's nation. But there are many things going on in our country now that only a godless nation could accept. America needs to be revived. And no matter what other projects we do, the two essentials of reviving America or any nation are teaching the divine principle. That's why all of us are here, and blessing people. Everything else is kind of secondary to those points. We also explained, we have a vision of where we'd like to be in America by 2020. And the first point is we have to be happy and healthy and God-centered families. We have to be happy, right? Again, no matter what we do, even if we accomplish great things for God and true parents, if we're not happy, if we're miserable, and our children are miserable, and people can see this doesn't look like a group of winners, what's the point? I always like to say and feel we're on God's winning team. That's my motto. But it's got to look like that as well. And secondly, I think all of us would agree we'd like to be growing. Our membership has been stagnant for a long time. That's the fact. We want to see those numbers increase. And we'd like to see our influence increase. We were in Washington, D.C. last week, and we did our very best. And we had some great people there. I was particularly inspired by former Congressman Dan Burton, holding up True Father's speeches and saying, if America would read these two speeches, then America could be saved. I would be happier if I saw Mr. Trump or Ms. Clinton holding up those speeches with the same conviction, or any of our current leaders. I mean, we should have influence in this country. And we have a possibility for that. We also want to see our younger generation active and leading the movement. One of the things that people really liked in Washington, we're seeing how many young people were on the stage, emceeing, leading. As I came in this morning, I was greeted by young people in our headquarters in New York. Most of the leaders are now in their 20s and 30s. It's obvious, right? I mean, you heard my biography. You probably did the math quickly and thought, good God, that guy's almost 60. Time for a new president. I agree. And this is really important to me, I would like America to be known as the giver to the other nations of the world. We might not be able to match what Japan did over all these years, but I'd like people to think that America is the generous giver to the world mission, and that Mother can approach us when she needs something done, and we'll not say, oh, Mother, we can't do that, we're weak and poor, but yes, Mother, we will, okay? So we made some goals. They're big goals. I'm not going to go over them too much. The first goal we made, which we announced publicly on the mall, was we're going to bless 1 million Americans. Actually, other nationalities can apply as well. But we want to bless 1 million people. Where does that number come from? A lot of people said, are you out of your mind? But the reality is there are nations like the Philippines and Thailand and Nepal and others which are on the way to achieving that kind of result. And it's great. And when I hear the report, I feel inspired, but I also feel a little bit skeptical. Because the truth is that nobody ever said anywhere, let's follow Nepal, or let's be like the Philippines. Those are great countries, and I love the people of those nations. But the fact is, people are looking to America. So we have to believe that we could do something like that. I do believe that. We also want to increase our membership to 30,000 people. Where does that number come from? It comes from True Father. He gave it to us way back in the 70s. Many times I heard him with my own ears saying, if you could find me 30,000 members, I can transform this nation. But we couldn't. We may have found more than 30,000 over the years, but they didn't stick around. And flowing out of that, there's goals for our associate members or friends, and this goal that half of our leaders will be under 40 by 2020. That's one that Mother's really appreciative about. She is often saying, I don't have long. I don't have long, and after I'm gone, do you think it will be easy to make any changes? It won't. So while I'm here, please let me train and bring the younger people. And of course, the thing that we're going to talk about today here is upgrading our physical presence, our footprint in the top 12 cities of America. Actually, this is another thing that True Mother asked me personally to think about. And it was one of my grieving points from Washington last week, that, what if some senators and congressmen decided they want to come and visit our Sunday service in Washington? Our situation there is very, very humble, despite all these years. And it doesn't shout at you blessing, success, victory, confidence. It's actually a very poor situation. As I mentioned, we want to contribute $10 million to the world mission. So it was Dr. Kim who gave the report. But at the end, True Mother asked the presidents of America and Japan and Korea to comment on the report and to state whether or not we believed it in ourselves. So here I am. You can see the leaders there sitting back. It's almost like 15 rows of judges. And you're standing there like the defense witness, explaining what you're going to do. But Mother liked it, and she expressed her appreciation that America had made some meaningful goals. Now, how to get to those goals and bring them to reality month by month, year by year is actually something which can only be done when all of our communities feel an ownership and a belief in part of it. So we won't have time to cover all of that today, but I want you to know kind of where we stand in relation to True Parents. Mother said after Washington, I trust America. There were times when True Parents felt they couldn't trust America, but that's not the case anymore. Mother trusts America. She trusts American members. She knows that we love True Parents and we're faithful, and we have a commitment and a belief for this country. Why don't we give ourselves a round of applause for that? So, Mother has announced this 2020 vision. In her mind and heart, the thing she's praying for every day, if you'd like to know, is that there will be 7 nations which can be called or claimed by God as Chonulguk nations. Now, in the ideal, that would mean that everyone's blessed, the leaders are members, and study of the principle is universal, and many other things as well. But at least in this critical time period where we're not working, here we are. We have to present progress in these areas towards the 2020 goals. The first one is the Blessing and Tribal Messiah movement. The second is evangelism and church growth, the development of youth leadership, the increase of our social influence and a plan to do that, financial sustainability, and physical presence. Those are Mother's goals, not mine. The 6 areas that she's demanded we focus on. So when we made our goal, we had some assumptions. The first one was that the goals that True Parents gave us long ago are still valid. We can't write them off or say, well, that was a different time, or that was then and this is now. No. We have to make an effort to reach those goals. They're part of True Parents' unfinished business in this country. And secondly, that we are capable of doing at least as well as other nations, maybe better. We don't want to settle to be just mediocre. And we should seek to help other nations fulfill their goals. So it's a work in progress. And as I said, one of the things I want to accomplish by meeting with you today is to pique your interest in these goals and to start a discussion with the headquarters, among yourselves, as tribal messiahs, is what can we do to help make such large goals? Obviously Boston is not going to bless 1 million people. I shouldn't say obviously, you might. But it would probably be good if you thought, well, how many could we bless? And how can we start? And what would we think of as being a stretch goal for Boston? If every community made that commitment, we'd be, significantly on the way. So I'm here to talk only about one point of this, because my time is short, the concept of having new or upgraded churches in the top 12 cities in America. And we have made a list, and Boston is on there. Actually, it's number 2. These are cities where I feel we need to have a first-class presence. Actually, by population, Boston comes in only about 21. There are many other cities, particularly out west, like Houston and Phoenix, which have grown enormously in the last 20 years. And we don't have a strong presence there either. In fact, in some of those cities, we have much less. But again, Mother's always talking about the 7.3 billion people in the world. You hear it, right, when you hear her speak? So I must think, as church president, about 330 million people in America. Where do they live? Where are they focused? We've recently acquired 2 new churches. You heard about it. Perhaps you saw the weekly report. I want to invite you to go visit them if you can. If you're visiting family or you have cause to go to our new church in Los Angeles or our new church in Dallas. Dallas one is a favorite of mine. They have a gorgeous gym. That was one of the things the young people of the community said, we must have a gym in our new church. It's more important than anything else. So we got a gym, and it's air-conditioned as well. And of course, it has a beautiful place to worship. Now, the Dallas church had a facility for 15 years, 20 years. Most of the community, particularly the second generation, grew up in that church on Anson Road. They loved it. They did their best to care for it. And it was a really wrenching decision to decide maybe we can do something better. But they did. So in these cities, there's really 3 possible situations. The first is like Los Angeles. They had no permanent location. Los Angeles Church, in our number 2 city, had been meeting in a theater for 5 years, in a fish house, in universities, in rented facilities for as long as they could remember. In that case, it's pretty clear, right? We should buy a facility. That's what True Mother told me. Get a permanent facility. Yes, True Parents didn't come just to build another church, but you have to have a base. So we bought that base. Or second, maybe the city already has a permanent location that is good for now. It's big enough, it's good enough, in which case it makes sense that we should keep it and we should maintain it. Or we might have a place that may not be fit for purpose anymore, in which case, following True Mother's guidance, we should consider to sell that, if and only if we could acquire something that is much better. And you have to get the new place before you don't have the old place, that way around. So let's talk briefly about Beacon Street. I'm sorry I don't have a more focused picture. My cell phone was out that day. These are the few things I want to cover with you. I'm going to go very quickly because I want to get to Jim. First of all, I acknowledge Beacon Street is one of the most important assets of the unification movement in America. It is. And secondly, the local community has sacrificed and invested a great deal to keep pace with the task of maintenance and repair. Not only that, the building is central to the spiritual history of our movement in Boston. And more than that, it's an important landmark in the Boston city. And by the grace of God, due to its strategic location, the property has increased in value over the years. We have other properties that have decreased in value, but this is one that has done well. But at the same time, although we benefit from a process called grandfathering, the truth is the building is not up to modern standards. It needs a lot of renovation. And our estimate is that to accomplish a meaningful level of restoration that would really make a difference, we're probably looking at about between $5 and $7 million. And if that, even if, for example, headquarters kicked in $2 million to get it started, still, the interest alone would be around $35,000 a month to pay for those renovations. It's certainly an option. In the last year, I wanted to let you know we've received several unsolicited offers. We haven't put the property on the market. We're not going out looking to sell this or any property, but people have been approaching us saying, we'd like to buy it. And what I think is that any community, if we're really going to be good stewards, must look at all the options. We cannot stay in the past. We certainly shouldn't have unrealistic views of the future. We have to be good stewards. Financially, you have some small loans. I think you know this. This is information from the books. $189,000 on a line of credit, $125,000 on a mortgage, about $325,000. That's not a lot of loan for a property this valuable. You have done amazing work over a long period of time. I don't think you can read all these numbers, but this is, just according to our records, all the money that this community has poured into the property over the last 15 years, about $800,000, on average about $70,000 a year, or almost $6,000 a month, every month, for the last 180 months. It's a lot. Financially, you're a stable church. I appreciate very much the work of Pastor Edgerly and the Finance Committee. There are communities where expenses overrun income every month. This is not one of those communities. No, this is a well-stewarded community where income exceeds expenses every year. Not by much, but, you know, black is better than red, right? So I appreciate you for doing that. Let's give Pastor Edgerly a round of applause and the Financial Committee. But I would point out that, if you look at that another way, as a return on an investment, how much of the invested value that is in this property is the annual surplus is actually very small. Of course, this is a time when you can get nothing for putting money in the bank. But still, even in the best year, it's 0.3%. So, as president, looking at every community in the country, I have to look at these kind of things. When I go to see Mother, I can't tell her, I didn't really bother to check it out. I made up my mind without looking at the numbers, and this is what I want to do. Mother would not be happy with that. Earlier this year, we had a professional appraisal done of this building. It had been a long time. We wanted to know, well, how much is it worth, according to professional people? And their report was that as it is right now, with no improvement, with no work on it further, it's probably worth around $15 million. Now, appraisals are kind of fluid things. They can, the market can go up or down. Interestingly, they said if it had parking, if you were able to have parking underneath the building instantly, its value would jump to about $20 million. So what did we buy the house for, Jim? 700? 475. So $475,000. Now, I will be honest with you. I was speaking with Reverend Kim earlier this morning, and he pointed out at several junctures in the last 20 or 30 years, we had appraisals done, and of course, they were always much more than the money we paid. So there's been several times when there was a serious consideration about whether this property should be developed. So we've had 3 written offers on this property, in writing, and I expect that more will emerge. Now, Jim has pointed out, correctly I think, they're not making any more of Beacon Hill, right, Jim? There's no expansion plans. This is it. So we would expect that interest in a property here will remain strong. That would be a logical conclusion. Of course, it is the case, and it's certainly happening in New York City right now, that real estate can go through bubbles where things froth up and are very valuable and then they drop down again. So the first offer is from a guy called Kobe Kempel. He's a Jewish developer from Tel Aviv. He lives in the city and he's a major property developer here. And his offer is $20 million in cash. So no contingency for financing, but one contingency is he has to get the permits to do what he would like with the building, which is to make it into luxury condominiums. I'm only presenting to you as the facts and his personal home. Second offer is from a group called the Davis Group. They have a slightly better offer, $21 million. However, they have more in the way of due diligence in terms of inspecting the condition of the building, the codes, and all those things. Our experience in other cities is that when people put these type of conditions in, their plan is to reduce the offer as they discover things. They never discover things that are beneficial to the seller. Somehow, it always works the other way around. And there's another offer from a group called the Salvador Capital Partners. It's even better, $24 million, but again, with this due diligence commitment. So I'm wrapping it up, but let's consider just, in the exercise of fairness, if the property is sold, one, I acknowledge, I think we all agree, that will be the end of our presence on Beacon Hill. We won't have another opportunity to acquire a property, most likely. Nothing is absolute, but it would be a big step. Secondly, there will be many who grieve that a legacy property is being sold. Yep, I get letters about that kind of thing all the time. And we might end up with seller's remorse 5 or 10 years from now if the people we sell it to now flip it 5 years later for $50 million. People will be knocking on my door at night with shotguns saying, "You idiot." I acknowledge these are real risks. However, it would allow the community to acquire a new modern facility that meets all the possible conditions on a wish list. And I've been hearing from this community and others, well, what do we really want looking forward for the next 20 or 30 years if we had a blank slate? I want you to engage in that conversation. We won't get anywhere if we don't examine all the options. We'd also be freed from the worry and liability of the maintenance of an old building. I mean, it is a worry. It is a liability. I mean, I know Dar and others worry about what might happen. By your good diligence, so far, God has protected us. That's great. We'd also be able to afford a carp center, maybe 2 or 3, in this city that's the most important for students in America. And we'd probably be able to acquire other property that would provide a steady, lasting income to this community. Instead of having to put money in and get a small return, it might be possible to have a lot more money that would allow, for example, the hire of a full-time pastor, youth ministers, and other things. Something to think about. If the property is not sold, then, of course, these things would have to happen. We'd have to have a realistic plan, not an aspiration, about a way forward that would bring equal benefits to this community and others. And you'll perhaps hear about that from Jim. So just a reminder, these are our goals. And I wanted to mention to you 2 more things. When I became president 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I was shocked to find out that the American movement was still being subsidized by the church in Japan. I thought that ended long ago. But when I wasn't president, I never really thought that was my responsibility. I thought the Washington Times, yeah, that's Mr. Jew. That's the Washington community. Or Belvedere in East Garden, or this project or that project. That's not where I live, so that's not my responsibility. But of course, as president, I can't think that way. The whole country is part of my responsibility. So Mother challenged her. She said, look, enough of this. You cannot rely on housewives in Nagoya and Osaka and Hiroshima and other places to underwrite the projects that are going on in America. You either have to stop them or you have to fund them. And, some projects it's easy to think we'd like to stop. But the Washington Times, in which Father invested so much, when the UCI group sold the Washington Times away, Father said, the Washington Times has been taken from my hands by trickery and deceit with people with the minds of communists. And when we got it back, he was so happy. How can we give it up? But on the other hand, we can't ask Japan to keep paying. So it is a great pride of mine that over the last 3 years, we have reduced that subsidy from Japan to 0. And in fact, in this year, we're giving millions to the world. And I do want to acknowledge God, whose blessing it is, but I also want to acknowledge Dr. Michael Jenkins, the CFO, because it's under his watch that many of these difficult changes have taken place. So please acknowledge him for that tremendous work and effort. And Reiko, please stand up. It's not an easy job, but he did it. So you might think, okay, now we come to the truth. What properties has headquarters sold in order to make that financial change? You probably heard we sold UTS, right? There was a big rumor in January that UTS had already been sold to a group of developers. Anyone hear that rumor? Come on, be honest now. Yep, okay, I know where you live. Last month it was the New Yorker. New York has been sold and Wanju McDivitt has taken all the money to the Cayman Islands. Yeah, you heard that rumor? Actually, it was the Channel Islands. Oh, no, wait. Sorry. Wrong report. Or 4 West 43rd Street. You know, I heard that had been sold several times as well. And even if you were in Washington, you would have heard that the Columbia Road Church has been sold, all to satisfy headquarters' insatiable demand for cash, right? Be honest, you've heard that. But the truth is, not one of those properties has been sold. All of the turnaround has come by the grace of God, strengthening our fundraising, our businesses, our decision, actually, that we will never again rely on another nation to do God's will. And through business and other means, we have been blessed by God. So I'm going to finish here. I just wanted to, and I took far too much time, sorry, but I wanted to give you kind of the whole picture. And by the whole picture, I mean my view of the whole picture, which is not the whole picture. Your views are important too. Every community has something to say to it. So to represent the community, I'd like to welcome Jim. He's prepared. He was also our gracious host last night. Thank you, Jim. And let's welcome him to give a response.
Good morning. You know, it's really impressive to me to see how much Dr. Balcom travels. Man, it's unbelievable. I don't know how you do it. And I want to thank you for being here, and also Reverend Mrs. Jenkins. So I don't know if we've done this already, but of course, Fumiko, welcome to Boston. Very, very happy and honored to have you here, sincerely. Okay, so I'm going to really go pretty quickly here, and I'm going to ask you to pay close attention. There's a ton of stuff on the next 18 slides, but this is important stuff for all of us. It's important to share it with our national headquarters representatives. It has to do with our personal future. So I'm going to ask you to pay attention. This is not very exciting, but it's important. Okay, and the material that I'm going to present, about 80% of it is based upon our meeting that we had one Sunday, almost exactly a month ago, August 21st. We had a community meeting, and I've organized the information we produced during that. And Randy Francis joined us representing our national headquarters, at least by video. I'm going to talk about the property strengths, weaknesses, the issues we have with code compliance that Dr. Balcom mentioned, issues of handicap accessibility, additional construction requirements, specific concerns favoring property sale, favoring property retention, real estate opportunities, future scenarios, a wish list for this for a future property if there is to be one in terms of location and facilities. A few things about how proceeds of a sale could be used, how we should interface with headquarters, how should we raise the funds if we were to renovate the building, and then recommended step forward. It's a lot of stuff. The strengths of this beautiful building that we live in, we work in. It's a AAA quality location, right near the Park Street MBTA. Very beautiful, desirable neighborhood, the most desirable neighborhood in the city of Boston. When I tell people, where's your church? 46 Beacon Street. Wow, no kidding. Really? Did you say Beacon Street? Yeah, I said Beacon Street. Right across the street from the Boston Common and the Boston Garden. Isn't that cool? We live right, it's right there. That's so nice having that. And of course, Holy Ground's right across the street, right? Yeah, we're in the State House neighborhood.
That's right. John Kerry.
John Kerry lives right behind us, right. And Jack Welch lives right next door.
Jack Welch?
Yeah, yeah. But this is John Kerry's neighborhood. One time I was talking to Catherine on the sidewalk, and John Kerry and his wife walked past us on their way to go out and walk in the Boston Common. Remember that? Catherine said, "What should we got a witness to him, quick, do something." Our Secretary of State. Okay, we're near the colleges and the university. A very convenient location for young people. They like this neighborhood. Very high status address, of course, and I personally think being across the street from the parking garage is super. Yeah. It's a very useful facility. This is an exceptional room. This room is designed by the same man who designed Symphony Hall. The acoustics in this room are world class. This is probably one of the very best music rooms in the city of Boston. This is a very special room. It's really hard to find space like this. We know, I mean, okay. Very useful in terms of offices and meeting rooms. We have a nice, very functional kitchen, a very functional dining room, 16 apartments, and it's a very affordable and convenient residence for those families and young people who live here. It's a very unique legacy asset for our movement. True Parents actually stayed on the 6th floor for some time, and they visited here many times. We had many meetings with True Parents here. They used the prayer room as their dining room, and they lived on the 6th floor. I have pictures of True Parents eating in what's now our prayer room. There's been 4 decades and 2 generations of public use by this building, and it really does represent a legacy property for our unification movement in the United States. And we're very proud to be the custodians. I think we're very aware of the historic importance of this property. And it's actually, people think this is a very difficult building to own. No, it ain't. The assessed value of this building is like $600,000. That's what the city has it for the tax basis. It's assessed at about the same price that we paid for it in 1976. So our annual taxes are like $26,000, $40,000, $24,000. This is a very inexpensive building to own, really inexpensive building to own. Cheap. We live on Beacon Hill and our tax is $24,000 a year. It's an income generating property. We generate between, let's say, $11,000 and $19,000 a month in income from the property to support it. And we do expect that the property value will continue to appreciate. Those are the strengths. And if you'd like to add to those strengths, we might not have time for it today, but you can certainly communicate something to me and I'll include it in this document, okay, if you'd like to add anything to that. Weaknesses. We do have a lot of problems within this building of parts of the building being out of code. Here are the code compliance issues very quickly. The building should have emergency lighting and exit signs. We need to have an upgraded electrical systems of all the panels and the wiring. There should be a fire alarm, carbon monoxide detection, and fire detection systems. We should have sprinklers throughout the building, corrected stair rails and handrails, a second point of egress on the first floor so you can leave the building, let's say, from the back instead of just the front. The entrance on the sidewalk that goes into the basement needs to be reconstructed. The fire escape and the kitchen need to be inspected for compliance. And we do need additional bathrooms, drinking fountains, and janitor closets if we were to use this building commercially. Those are the areas of compliance updates that would be required. These come from our architect, Al Fine. The building does have some very important shortcomings. The biggest problem with this building is it only has a single entrance. So you can't easily, right now, separate the public space from the apartments. That's a big problem. And it makes the apartments, unless it's remedied, it makes the apartments much less attractive than they would be if they had a separate entrance. There's no air conditioning, as you know, in this building, and it gets very hot in the summer. No parking on the property. Some people believe the size of the sanctuary is too small for future growth. It is expensive to heat in the winter. We pay a lot of money to heat the building. And some people come in here and think that the first floor entry area is very dark and not inviting. It does require, it's very management intensive. That's why Yoko Miranda is here every day, because it requires a lot of effort to maintain the building and also to manage the residencies issues of the building. So there's a lot of management time put into owning this building. It's not just Yoko, but Yoko's the one that oversees it. And, you know, it does take a lot of my time, too, as a pastor. There is a lot of rehabilitation and upgrades needed to get the building up to the standards that Reverend Dr. Balcom referred to. Here's a quick list of those. Can you see these? Can you see the screen from back there? Yeah. First of all, we need to improve handicap accessibility, which means we have to rehabilitate and modernize the elevator. We have to get a variance for the elevator because it's too small to put handicapped access in. There should be a lift at the front door that's flush with the sidewalk. We need to have handicap accessible restrooms on the first and second floor for both men and women. And we need special signage, handrails, and door handles to properly set up the building for handicapped accessibility that would be required if we were going to put it into commercial use. Okay, then, sorry. Now, the upgrades that are needed, this is based upon several studies by developers and architects. Services improvements, we need, sorry, that's spelled wrong. Radiator and plumbing repair. The plumbing in the building is actually in pretty good shape, but there are some radiators that still aren't working. There should be HVAC renovation throughout the entire first 2 floors. The exterior has been partially pointed and brickwork, about 1/3 of it's finished. We need to finish that. We need to steam clean the front of the building, finish installing new windows and lintels. That's partially done, right, Dar?
Yes.
Yep. But it needs to be finished. We need to renovate that corner glass room on the uphill side of the front of the building. That's kind of a liability right now. In the interior, we have to renovate the function room, the hallways, and the stairways. We consider that to be our next project. Install new lighting in those areas. Upgrade the kitchens and the bathrooms, update them. Remove asbestos from the basement and replace the window doors in the French room. So those are the major accessibility, code, and updated work that need to be done in this building. There is an issue with the zoning of this property, and I can't even remember all the complications, but it's really not zoned. It would need to be zoned differently if it was put into commercial use. Right, Catherine?
Well, it's the tax assessors and the zoning department are different.
Yeah. And neither one is quite...
One sees it as a hotel, the other side sees it as a church and then private.
Okay. So the zoning is a little bit confused for the building. And I'd also say that there's really that I can see, it's not easy to point to the spiritual benefit of having residency in this building, because I don't really see any correlation between residency and activism. So we're basically, for the most part, we're providing a service that doesn't really result in any public response from the residents. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the people who live in this building aren't here right now, to be quite honest. They're sleeping. Or they're working. Thank you. Or they're, sorry.
Doing homework.
Doing homework. Okay. All right. So specific concerns about the building that would favor retaining ownership. I would say, based upon I'm pretty confident this is an accurate statement. Finding a way to retain the ownership of the building is the clear preference of the majority of the people in our community. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, and I can tell you that that's the overwhelming majority. There's really no question about that. There's not much debate in our community. There are a few people who don't agree with that, but everyone that talks to me and tells me their opinion has the same opinion. it could be extremely difficult to find an alternative that we actually prefer. And the reason I know that is because we've done this before, and it was not even close. I looked and looked and looked, and it was like, forget it. And that ended the whole process for us about 8 years ago. We did try to find a preferred location, and we didn't even find anything we could take seriously. I believe, this is something that did come up in our meeting, the building sale could send a wrong signal. Internally, a lot of people think that we should do much more to retain Father's legacy, keep in place what Father put in place, and not be so free to change things. It's a controversial issue. And also externally, we don't really want to be send a signal to Boston that the Unification Church is moving out, is gone from, that's just not, there are organizations that have done that, and when that happens, it's in the news, what happens on Beacon Hill. I'm concerned that if we put a lot of focus on the building, it would interfere with our attention that we should be putting into 2020 goals. And I do believe our local leadership has proven its ability to manage this building and to manage gradual renovation. We have a track record of doing that. Specific concerns would favor a sale of the building. Very high cost of renovation. So Dr. Balcom's number was 5 to 7 million. I've never seen a number that big. I think the number that Al Fine gave us, but I can check on this. We do need to figure that out for sure. But the number that I found from an old document was like 2 to 3 million. But anyways, it's somewhere between $2 and $7 million. And we can nail that down and get us some help from Al Fine. There is a very big concern about the future income that this building can generate in its current configuration, because there is a declining student population among our blessed children. The building right now isn't quite full. There's about 3 empty beds. So we're not expecting a big demographic bulge to come through here. That demographic bulge is already more or less passed by. And they certainly benefited from the building. Also, we know that there's a very low level of tithing at the present time among our second generation that would be also a source of support for this building. But by the way, we generally don't support the building with tithing. We support the building with rents. So there's an ongoing concern about the safety, specifically the fire safety of our residents who live here. The building isn't properly alarmed and has enough sprinklers. That's a serious issue. There is a possibility that at some point the city could interfere with the continuing use of the building that's current because of code violations. There is that possibility. But they've come by here and given us warnings, and Al Fine has given, that's the complicated story, but that is a possible complication for our future. We may lack the capability of managing a more sophisticated real estate project in this building than we currently have in-house. And if we did a rehabilitation, it would very likely trigger a reassessment by the city, and the taxes that we pay would go way up. They would reassess the taxable part of the building, which is floors 3 to 6, put a new assessment on it, apply the tax rate, and our tax cost would go up a lot. That has never happened, but it could happen once we put in the construction requests for construction permits. Okay. Opportunities specifically related to real estate. Dr. Hiroy constantly mentions to us that if we did receive full 10% tithing from our membership, it would be, many, many more options would be feasible about upgrading this building if we did have full participation in our tithing. It would be a very different story financially in this community. The first 2 floors of this building offer exceptional, commercially viable event space in a perfect location for holding high-end events. And we all know this, but between here and there is a lot of investment and a lot of management time. There's plenty of public institutions, mostly schools, right in this neighborhood that might find, if they were invited to find a way to utilize this property in a rehabilitative form may well be interested, but we've never done the research. We have just started that research. The current rents in this building are probably about a third of what they could be based upon market rates. So there's a lot more upside in rental income in this building. We could immediately boost the income by converting it and using it through Airbnb. And one brother has done the analysis of that, and the amount of income available from that is huge, just from doing that. Jerry Lux did that analysis. Right, Jerry?
Yeah, and actually it wouldn't change the status of the building. Even if our current residents would invite people into their home, like say with a bunk bed or something, then
Okay, Jerry, we don't have time for the, we're rushing.
Just to increase the value, we're talking like maybe even up to 40 beds for Airbnb, keeping the current residents as is. We could increase, that would be an additional income with Airbnb.
Yeah.
No one would have to move on.
Okay. If anybody wants to see Jerry's numbers, I have them, right? Or you can ask Jerry. This would be an exceptional property, showcase property for HSA if it was fully renovated. This would be world-class. Great, great asset for our movement on Beacon Hill if it was fully renovated. It would be just a masterpiece. It is a landmark symbol for our history. There is a possibility of turning the basement into a parking lot, which is an unexploited opportunity. And this building could serve as collateral for a loan that would be required to fund the rehabilitation. So here's some scenarios that came up on August 21st for the future of the building. Continued gradual renovation. This is what we've been doing for the last 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And it's been locally funded from our own budget. Accelerated renovation, which is doing more quick rehabilitation, dealing with some of the bigger problems if we had a sort of an annual commitment from our headquarters, like an annual budget for dealing with fire issues and egress issues and things like that. Invest and retain this building for commercial use, lease it out long-term to a university or one of the institutions around here, and we just use it on Sunday. It would be their property in a sense, and we'd get access to the building rooms based upon, to using the first floor based upon a schedule, so we could continue to own it, continue to use it, and we'd have income from it, from the lease from them. It could be very nice monthly lease payment for us, finance the operation of our church, and hopefully they would upgrade the building so they could use it for their entertaining purposes. We could rent and lease the floors 3 through 6 commercially at market rates, but retain and just keep ownership over the public space. That would require a second entrance. Some people suggested using the public space on the first floor for a Unification Church museum, because there's so much traffic in this neighborhood. It'd be a great place for a Unification Church museum and used for outreach events. And another option is to liquidate this property. We saw the numbers that Dr. Balkin put up, $20 to $24 million just without even bringing it to market. And there's a lot you can do with those funds to acquire additional other properties for church use, but also as investment opportunities. Okay, if we were to consider alternative locations, here's what we came up with for our wish list. In terms of location, our wish list, if we were to have an alternative location close to the subway system, probably in Boston or the university areas of Cambridge or Brooklyn. Not all of Cambridge, but parts of Cambridge or Brooklyn. A convenient place to invite students and close to a park for our children. In terms of the facility, the suggestion was that the main room should have more capacity than this room, but really does need to have good acoustics. It's nothing like going to a church. The sound is horrible. I mean, we're spoiled by being in this room, I can tell you. But if you go to a church with low ceilings, dropped ceilings, it's just not the same, man. a church in an office building, I mean, that's just not acoustically, anyways, perhaps it's a minor point, but it's very important to me. All right. We need to have several meeting rooms and classrooms, of course. We could specify that if we had to, what several means. A kitchen, a fellowship space where young adults would like to congregate and gather informally, modern living quarters and offices, parking lot, good audiovisual and internet, air conditioning, brand new or easily maintained, brighter space, income generating, no mortgage. We don't have a mortgage now. We do have a small mortgage, yeah. And probably not a traditional church structure. Although I did see that the churches in Dallas, that's actually a church, right? That was a kind of a modern contemporary church structure, yeah. Okay, almost done. How could the proceeds from a sale of this building be used? We could set up an endowment for the upkeep and the management of a future property. We could buy a new church plus an investment property. We could establish some sort of a public service foundation to offer grants from an endowment. We could purchase a workshop or a carp center. Or we could support the purchase of other churches, such as the Worcester Church, or perhaps put funds into a district church fund for New England, as what we could do with proceeds if this building was sold. How should we interface with our national headquarters? That was another issue we discussed. We could either present our proposal to headquarters as long as it was viable economically and consistent with 2020, or we could develop a proposal by working jointly with a headquarters on a joint committee. But the most important thing would be a transparent process between headquarters and Boston. That's the most important issue to this community, right there. It'd be nice if during this procedure we could ask headquarters if they would help us with the professional fees. Otherwise, we're going to get kind of hung up. Can we really afford to hire Al Fine again? Can we really afford to use a consultant? But these people actually are pretty economical. We don't hire fancy lawyers and fancy architects, but we do need to have kind of a budget to look into this stuff. If we were to raise funds to retain the building, how could we do that? I think it's pretty simple, and Dr. Balcom referred to that. We'd need a business plan. You know, a business plan is two parts, the operating plan and the financial plan. So we'd have an operating plan, what to do with the building, if we were to decide to try to retain the building. That we would make a local appeal here in Massachusetts, and then a national appeal, fundraising appeal. We would probably ask for some headquarter commitment, and we would probably get a collateralized loan to use the building as collateral. But of course, that business plan would have a lot more income than the scenario would have a lot more income in it than we currently have, because we really couldn't afford a big reconstruction loan right now. We'd have to have a plan that would support that. So here's my last slide, I think. This is what we recommend how to proceed. We should start with a look into the following issues of feasibility that are really not that complicated. Write up quickly a description and the pros and cons of each one of these scenarios, but we could, sorry, what happened to our scenarios? I don't know. Okay, each one of those scenarios, sorry. Write up a quick description. What do they actually mean, and what are the pros and cons for each of those scenarios? Find out what it really would cost to put all those compliance upgrades, accessibility upgrades, and new construction in place, somewhere between $2 and $7 million. That's not hard to get that number. Start searching for an alternative location. Work with a real estate agent or two, and actually find out what's out there. We could start that right away. someone could start to reach out to Emerson College and Lesley College and Suffolk University, Boston University, and see if there's any interest in someone becoming a long-term lessee of the property. Meet with a seasoned Boston events manager to find out what they think the income potential is commercially downstairs after renovation. So we could put together a business plan if that was the scenario we decided to pursue. Meet with a seasoned real estate agent to find out how this company could be this business could be marketed if it was to be sold. We've done that in the past, of course. We've spent a lot of time with Caldwell Banker when we were looking into selling this building in the past. And evaluate the feasibility of a second entrance, which would give access just to the apartments, separated from the public space, and also evaluate the feasibility of a basement garage using architects. We actually have an architect living in the building who can help us. If we were to sell, our suggestion would be, our request would be, so there's no controversy and no feelings of, no ill feelings, to agree before anything is actually sold or even put on the market, we would suggest that we agree on how the proceeds from the sale would be allocated in advance on a percentage basis. We agree with that, so there's no controversy when the time comes when the money is actually in the bank. And I would suggest, this is my suggestion, to put the property on the market rather than doing it as a private sale. So we make sure we get the maximum value. That's the way the real estate market works. You just need one buyer. Believe me, there's buyers out there that want to. My neighborhood's all owned by Chinese now. They want to own assets in Boston. That's the reason our real estate. So you only need one buyer. So someone could offer $35 million. You don't know. I'm just saying that you got to let the market work in order to get the maximum. That one buyer could be. Not even know about the building yet.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Balcom, and also Reverend Edgerly. That was a wonderful presentation, and I think that we're here as family to understand what God's providence is, how to go forward, and I also want to thank Dr. Kilwan Kim, my elder brother, one of our finest regional directors for many years, and I think he did so much in this community to help Boston really solidify and move together as our district, and Mrs. Kim, we really thank you. Also, Catherine, our pillar, a patriot pillar of America, and also Dar, because I went through the building with Dar. It was quite interesting and powerful, all the things that have been done. So there's no question the community has to be really honored, as the members were listed, but the whole community, because you've done an amazing job of taking care of this priceless treasure of true parents. Reverend Bamfo, also my dear brother, who I worked with in ministry, you took care of it, and you even made it better and better. It was not easy. It was a heavy course for the Boston family. And then also True Father was very providentially leading us on to Chunilguk victoriously. True Parents victoriously perfected the whole foundation for Chunilguk and for True Parents. That's why the last 3 years in Las Vegas, I had many opportunities to be there visiting with True Parents. And I was very surprised because I think many of the brothers and sisters and some of the family members who don't understand what's going on now, they don't know what happened in that last 3 years. In that last 3 years, True Parents really established forever the oneness and the perfect unity of True Parents. That's why the final speech that Father gave with that white book, you remember the white book? And when he had us all go to OSDP in Las Vegas, and then a couple of the seminars, he gave every one of us the white book in Korean. And then we'd have to sit there at Hundoke many times, and Father would be correcting or changing or enhancing each word. One day, Father asked us, what's the most important thing in that speech? And we had different ideas, but we were all wrong. He said the most important sentence was in 2010. 2 times, Father proclaimed that True Parents have achieved perfect unity, perfect oneness. And on that foundation, the perfection, completion, and the absolute authority of God and the substantiation and embodiment of God occurred from that moment. That's really huge. That's why true parents are one. And that's the most important thing I can share. True parents are one. And we are living in God's providence. But I think we have to really also, beyond this discussion today, we have to really grasp the trial that we have faced this time in providential history. It's the most serious trial facing America and facing God's providence. There is no more serious time than this. There were more serious times earlier on when Father had to overcome the cross, and he overcame. But we're at another crossroads right now, because now true parents' covering does not cover us anymore. True parents, when we were walking under true parents' covering, true parents had to establish everything. True parents were responsible for everything. We were their children. Their covering covered us. But a new providence began. And Father's transferred that responsibility to us. We are no longer simply under true parents' responsibility. We are now tribal messiahs. And therefore, to make 1 million couples, each one of us have the responsibility, without question, to achieve 430 blessed couples, centering on our couple. That is the most central responsibility, and we don't have the answers to that yet, but we will. But we should understand also it's a time that's dangerous, because we are no longer simply under true parents' grace, and we can just continue to just go along and not make our 430 and not fulfill what really we need to do and not become true parents. We have to become true parents now ourselves. We really do. And we have to also win our younger generations to understand that. We are the Israelites, and we are the Israelites of the Chanukuk era. The central people of Israel were the Israelites, and central people in the New Testament providence was Christianity. That responsibility is transferred to us. And we are a humble group. We don't have a large number of people. We have a large number compared to other singular denominations or churches, but not in terms of all of Christendom. We are that people. So I'm grateful to you that you're staying faithful and centering on Reverend Edgerly as our pastor, and also our district pastor, Reverend Hempowitz, is here. I mean, this is really serious business. I can't tell you how serious it is right now. You know, our members are being attacked spiritually, and incredible battles are going on in people's spiritual life to decide, do I believe in true parents? Or am I going to have my understanding of true parents transformed to some other understanding and lose faith in everything Father taught us? Father said true parents are one. Father completed everything through his oneness with true mother. You can't have true parents. So on that foundation, for me and Dr. Balcom and Dr. Kim, we love you. We love you. That's why we're here. Headquarters already decided, based on the analysis our office did and the meetings we had with Jim and Spase and the committee, and we had several meetings, and we went through a process of review of the possible development of this building, what it would cost and what would be the return, and whether we could have a church in here or how we could work it out. We went through that quite a bit, and we can share those findings with you. But headquarters, the HSA board met, and it decided this property should be sold. And Dr. Kim absolutely said this property should be sold, and the Boston Church has to reinvest that money to really develop, because it's not happening the way it is. So I have to be honest with you. But there's something to understand too. Dr. Balcom showed 3 offers are on the table right now. But on top of that, why didn't we sign then? We didn't accept the offers. Why not? Because of you. Because we love you and we want to move together as one. Therefore, we're not going to make a move without really coming together in heart as one. We have to stay together. If you trust true parents, which you do by being here, really, let's walk together and also follow the principle. If the central figure of this continent, the continental director, says and checks with Mother and gets that kind of confirmation from heaven that we should move on, we have to be very careful, not just think headquarters, and be very careful Because it's very easy to drum up negative feelings towards, this thing up there that seems to just be off in the wilderness. But this thing up there is not what we're talking. We're not talking about headquarters. We're talking about true mother, true father in heaven. We're talking about our central figure, Dr. Kim, and he made a decision. We should go forward and sell. And he's giving Dr. Balcom incredible fire. Incredible. Why you didn't move? Why are you afraid to tell the people? They won't move with true parents? They won't. They will. He said, he defended. They will move with true parents, no matter what. So that's what I said too. Don't worry. True parents, family is one. We are one as true parents, brothers and sisters as a blessed central family. So that's why it's really a deep, deep issue. True parents, family that are united with true parents and with our blessed central families are united together. Do you stand with true parents? Yes. Do you stand with true parents? You're saying no. What are you saying no to?
Is the true family united?
They're working on it. But I'm talking about the members who are staying with true parents. We're united. When I ask you if you're united with true parents, you say yes. Yeah, I believe you. That's what I mean. We have to stay one with true parents. We have to really study. That's why the most important thing is to read Father's words every morning, deeply, and study and pray. I was with Father as much as any Western member. Not as much as many others, but I was with Father a lot. And I have to say, Father and Mother are one. And I see this time we're going through is very clearly a trial of faith. Just like the Israelites. They got out in the middle of the desert and they weren't sure, and it looked better to run back to Egypt like the way things were before. So that's why I just want to ask you, pray and be careful. Because this is not about a headquarters. This is not institutional. We're not talking. We have legal authority. HSA owns this building. HSA owns this building. The HSA Corporation, which is a non-for-profit 501c3 religious organization, it's a church. It has full authority. It doesn't need approval to make the moves that it could make. But why doesn't it do it? Because we are a family. And we have to stand as one. And I was in Lexington last night, staying at Jim Edgerly's home.
Why did the board make a decision like that? Why did they make a decision like that without even a conversation with this community?
Because I've been having the conversation. I've been having the conversations with this community. But hold on, let me finish. Let me finish.
I'm going to finish. The conversation is going on now.
This is a conversation.
Going on now. The board, it's not right that the board would make a decision like that with totally disrespecting the people who take responsibility.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Well, that's because you don't understand the decision.
Okay, what's the decision?
The decision was a discussion. Do we have the permission to sell the building? They said yes. There's no resolution. There's no legal decision to sell. But there is a commitment and a direction from our central figure, and there's approval by Mother to do that.
Okay.
Because well, let me finish what I need to say first, Jim. Let me finish first. Let me finish my presentation, okay. Because I was with Dr. Balcom and Dr. Kim with Mother when Mother said, we have to move on. We can't let the businesses simply hobble along and be barely surviving or losing money. And she gave a direction. If you do not turn these businesses around, if they're not making money and not self-sustaining, they have to be sold. Or they have to be fixed. And they have to become prosperous. It's amazing what happens to people once they're told that if you don't make a profit, we're going to change your role, we're going to take steps to change the business, and if you still can't make it, we're going to sell it. And we sold several businesses that were losing money like terrible. Manhattan Center Studios, Manhattan Center Productions, one lost money for the last 17 years, one lost money for the last 20 years. And then the Washington Times. $1.3 billion was spent on the Washington Times. It always lost money. But then Mother made it very clear, we're not going to continue to invest. Once we made up our minds, brothers and sisters, once we made up our minds, everything changed. Once you make up your mind, God will bless this city. God will bless this city like unbelievably. I'm telling you, people told me, you can't turn around the Washington Times. It'll never happen. But I saw it. Once we made up our minds, we're going to give our lives, fortune, sacred honor, then suddenly people start to appear that can help us. Whatever God wants us to do with Boston, people will appear that will help us. HSA didn't make a resolution, okay, the Boston property sold. There was no offer at that time, but there were offers coming in. That's why you have to understand, we're here to develop the conversation. Randy Francis has been here twice. Chris Stein, myself, I've been here 3 times. We're still in the midst of it. So before you jump to any conclusion, no, Mother's not negotiable about success. She's not accepting that any of our church facilities should not be something that we're proud today to bring our people into. So in other words, whatever we have to do to make our properties the most shining, sustaining, prosperous properties, we have to do that. And what Dr. Kim has experienced himself is that he's been around on the HSA board for 20 years. He knows, he's seen everything come, every discussion from different leaders to how we're going to develop, how we're going to make it, how we're going to do it. But none of those could work. Headquarters wasn't strong enough. And by the way, I want to make it clear, headquarters is not coming for money. Our businesses have become strong now. We're not selling any property so we can get a gain. We want to reinvest. What if you took the $24 million from this property and bought a building in downtown Boston, a glass building, for $250 million, which you could probably do with HSA's backing and with the 10% down, and you have a $4 million a year revenue, plus you have apartments on the top and you have your headquarters church in there for Boston. That will turn heads too, more than this. Because right now you can't bring anybody here not because of anything the community did, just because the weight of this structure, the way it's set up, doesn't work. And that's why I really want to ask you, I stayed in Lexington last night at Jim's house, where the first shots were fired. Are you more worried about Boston than America? I don't think so. If you really put it in that equation, Father sacrificed his family, he sacrificed everything. And Mother's absolute, we're going to Chun-Il-Guk. 430 blessed couples. We're going to Chun-Il-Guk, and we have to do it together as one. And therefore, would you be willing to sacrifice this building for America? Would you be willing, if really God called you to sacrifice this building for America, would you say yes or no? No, just answer, yes or no. Yes, right? How many in Boston would sacrifice their lives for God? Amen? Okay. Though that is the one thing I want to leave you with, is that our lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. We're fighting for America. We all are. We're desperately fighting for America. This is really our moment right now. We're not trying to just get along and make a little better congregation. We've got to go up to another level, brothers and sisters. That's why we won't do it without unity. So that's why we're here.
You just did it without unity. You just did it without unity.
All right, I'm going to exercise presidential privilege.
All right,
here.
thank you.
What kind of unity are you talking about?
I'm talking about unity.
And they will be, but please, it's already late.
No, it's not late.
I want to clarify what Dr. Jenkins said, and I also want to make one thing clear. So first of all, no decisions have been made. The decision of the board that I understood, and it wasn't just concerning this property, authorized me, as True Mother has requested, to examine the prospects of each of our facilities in the United States. And not one of them, this is important to understand, not one of them is exempted. Not East Garden, not Belvedere. No.
We're just asking to be treated
So we've come here and we've learned a lot. I really appreciate Reverend Edgley's presentation. Brought many things for me to think about. We absolutely, when we have our next board meeting, it's possible that Jim can come to testify. I think it's important. It is important to hear what each community feels. It's also important in prayer to really understand what God wants. And I'm not saying that headquarters know what God wants and the local communities don't. That would be facile and stupid. I'll tell you as your president, I don't know all the answers. I do believe in teamwork. And this meeting reminds me a little bit of our first meeting with True Mother in July, when she asked everyone to come with their ideas, but send them back, saying, you know what? You need to talk more. You need to have more teamwork. And my feeling is, having heard you, I know your passions in this room, I understand them. At the same time, we've had an opportunity to explain where we think we need to go, not just in Boston, but around the country. But I don't think, hungry as we are, that we'll be able to accomplish a lot more here in this meeting. I'm planning to stay for lunch, maybe be around for some of the younger folk who are here this afternoon. I can assure you, your voices are heard, they'll continue to be heard, but in the end, the decision will be made by Mother. It will. And I want to make sure that when that day comes, whether it's here or any place, that Mother has heard the exact situation. I don't have a dog in the fight, really. For me, the easiest thing in the world would be to leave things as they are. Just keep going. But I can't do that. I made a promise to Mother I would do my best to represent all the American family and churches. It's a tough thing. You can imagine that. But as I said, I think at this point, and I'm available to talk afterwards, we've already been here for 2.25 hours. We've listened very carefully to Jim's presentation. Thank you. You listened very respectfully to the things I brought to the table. And you may not like what Reverend Jenkins said, but I want you to pray to discern also if they're in there, also there isn't the voice of God about what he hopes for America. One final point. Mother is telling us, I don't have long. By 2020, I need to see something. We've had those deadlines and goals many times before, I know. But personally, I feel that after Mother is gone, it may be too late. The one phrase from the Washington Monument speech that burns in my soul is Father saying, America must rise up today. Tomorrow may be too late. So I do feel we don't have the luxury of all the time in the world, but neither are we pressed to come to a conclusion here on September 25th. Somewhere between those two, we will find where we need to go. Jim, if you'll permit me, I'd like to reiterate your invitation to Fumiko to come up and say a closing prayer. But if you have other points, then please do. But I really feel at this point it's better to move on. We've had an opportunity to hear each other's positions, and I personally need to digest some of them myself. All right. Okay. Well, thank you again. Please let's finish in unity and prayer.